when he was going to get picked today, we were all expecting that at some point he was going to get drafted on day 3. It would have been highly unlikely that he just went completely undrafted unless he directed teams and told them, we just want to make a decision afterward. Of all teams for him to go to, it has to be the team that not only already drafted a quarterback, but at the end of the night last night, when they took Dillon Gabriel from Oregon, everybody was freaking out. Everybody was saying, oh my God, Dillon Gabriel went before Shedeur Sanders. Now they're on the same team. I can't really make sense of what the approach is here. If Dillon Gabriel wasn't the pick and Shedeur Sanders was the guy today, I would be sitting here talking about tremendous value. You have a guy who I personally think is good enough to start. I think that there are people in NFL circles and people I've talked to that think he could start, but he fell because of the way he handled the interview process. Some NFL teams were rubbed the wrong way. They already addressed the quarterback position with traits of your players. But now that we have two guys that kind of fit similar descriptions of decorated college careers, accurate, good decision makers, poised players in the pocket, who's going to stay? Both of them aren't going to stay. Do you trade Dillon Gabriel after the preseason? None of this makes any sense. And I guess it's typical for the Cleveland Browns that they find a way to mess up their own draft class.
But when they moved off of Travis Hunter, you had to think that they were doing it with the assumption that this was a multi-year rebuild and they were going to go hard in the 2026 draft. And this was about just getting players that they believe can be on the team for 10 years. And Mason Graham's a really good player. So like there was no problem with that thought process. People got wrapped up in, the hype that is Travis Hunter, but there's no issue that way. And so I legitimately, especially after the second round, you're just thinking they're just all part of the rebuild. They're just stockpiling players, and then it's all going to be about 2026. And now it feels like that might be thrown out the window a little bit if Shedeur can be something, if he can be good. And so it's an exciting time, all things considered, because there was about to be a lot of apathy that set in because we just went through a 3-win season. It was miserable, and this next year being bad, it just would have been no fun at all. So you get that spark, which is just always very cool.
Rookie of the year market had Shedeur Sanders way out at 35-1, and you can't blame the sports books because the way that things looked was that whoever took him, he was just going to instantly be a backup because once the Browns had passed on him multiple times, well, okay, the Browns have obviously decided he's not going to be the dude. Everyone else went and filled the spots. He was going to be a backup. So this morning, you could have gotten Shedeur Sanders at 35-1 for Rookie of the Year. And what'd you say, Mike? What are we sitting right now?
15-1.
Yeah. 15-1 because they know what we just said, which is he's a pretty high chance to start. He's going to be a starter. You can't put 35-1 on a starting quarterback in the NFL for Rookie of the Year. You just cannot do it. And so any of y'all that took the ride, any of y'all that did the long shot there this morning, good on you. No matter what happens with Shedeur Sanders, you have a fantastic bet in your account because it is a 65% chance that he starts for this team.
If you made me guess how it happens, and this is coming from someone that for months was like, you're going to draft Shedeur Sanders, and when you draft him, he's your instant day one starter, and then you're off to the races. But being picked in the 5th round does change some things, and it definitely impacts the discussion. If you made me bet, I would bet it's Joe Flacco for like 4 or 5 weeks until the wheels fall off, like it always does with Joe Flacco. I don't think Kenny Pickett's making it out of training camp, if we're being honest, because you can't carry a million quarterbacks.
Sure.
So I would bet Kenny Pickett is the casualty. You throw Flacco out there, fan favorite. He's going to mentor Shedeur Sanders. Like, he's going to be good to be around. He'll be given a real opportunity. He'll flounder in it. Like, he'll do fine the way that Joe does, but he's getting older. He'll flounder. Shedeur comes in. Shedeur looks better than what Flacco did. And then you feel like you have a real quarterback moving forward and something to build on.
Did the front office, are they the ones responsible for taking Shedeur Sanders, or was this from above them, the owner coming in and saying, okay?
Mitch, it reeks of, an ownership move. But let me say this. Unlike the first round with Johnny Manziel, 5th round is, guys, my whole take on this thing, and by the way, I like Sanders. My whole take on this thing is, in the 5th round, you got nothing to lose. If you look at Andrew Berry's 5th round picks, I don't even know if any of them are in the NFL anymore. Okay, let alone on the Browns. So they took a flyer, they traded a 6 and a 7 and moved up and took the kid. Let's see what happens. He clearly missed the boat on the offseason. And I think Deion and Shedeur got humbled this weekend. I do. I think, first of all, Deion started with, I'm only going to let my kid play for 3 or 4 teams.
Yeah.
Then, Shedeur has the legendary thing. He's, dude, you're the quarterback in Colorado. Okay, you want to be legendary. That's great. He didn't work out at the combine. He didn't throw. He didn't run. He didn't. And then, the whole perception is, are you bringing that into your quarterback room right now? These are billion-dollar operations. Michael Lombardi always talked about this. NFL, it's one of the biggest companies in the world, an NFL team, billions of dollars. You're bringing a guy in at the quarterback position that's got to be able to lead, that the locker room's going to respect. And clearly, teams around the league didn't feel comfortable with that.
What's the worst thing you heard about him?
Yeah. Not hard to coach, but takes a while to come around on things. And I think even Deion over a beer would admit, Shedeur, he's very strong-minded. I wouldn't say hard-headed, but, he's got to coach him. It's going to take a lot to coach him. Now, Stefanski does a really nice job with quarterbacks. Flacco's in the room. There are adults in the room. But, guys, I have to say this in defense of the kid. I think he's going to come in here and work hard. As a fifth-round pick, you have nothing to lose. And could he win this job? Hell, yes, he can. It's Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco, and Dillon Gabriel. I don't know about right out of the gate training camp. But they're going to give him a shot. At 144, I would have done the same thing.
The news of the weekend, Shedeur Sanders, my goodness. And it was absolutely positively crazy what transpired with Shedeur. The fact that he fell out of the first round, that was believable. The fact that Shedeur Sanders fell out of day number 2 of the draft, that was crazy. The fact that Shedeur Sanders ended up going day 3, round 5, pick 144, that was insane. And honestly, I think there's a lot to get into here. Number one, I think it's pretty crystal clear that when it was all said and done, that NFL executives liked him. They weren't necessarily enamored with him. And I think that there were a lot of people who felt that he was more Andy Dalton than superstar. And that's where it starts in terms of evaluation. And, we compared him to Kirk Cousins, and still do, by the way. And Kirk Cousins was a 4th-round pick. And, I had other people tell me that, he would be Dak Prescott as a high end. And Dak Prescott was a 4th-round pick. Andy Dalton, 2nd-round pick. Jimmy Garoppolo, 2nd-round pick. Derek Carr, 2nd-round pick. And I think that for Shedeur, if you're a player that the NFL and NFL talent evaluators like, but you're not gaga over, and there's so much noise that goes into it. And, you go to the East-West Shrine game instead of the Senior Bowl, you don't play the game, and you don't work out at the Combine, and you bomb a slew of Combine interviews, and you're interviewing coaches and GMs as opposed to the reverse, and you're wearing headphones, and the music is blasting through, and you're not focused on it. And as our friend Tom McShay said, you had a whiteboard segment, an install segment with Brian Daboll, the Giants, and you bombed it and didn't like the fact that, Daboll called you out on it. And go back to Hard Knocks last year, those Daboll sessions with Drake May and with Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams, they're no joke. And, if you're not ready for it, that's a problem. Now, I also think you factor that in, plus who his dad is and the noise his dad makes and social media. And, there were teams that I'm sure if you thought a player was going to be okay or not a starter, you didn't want to deal with the noise. And, it's sad in a lot of ways for Shedeur that he fell to the 5th round. I thought that was crazy. I think he should have gone in day number 2. I will say the Cleveland Browns completely clueless how they attacked this. And, I like Dillon Gabriel. I'm on record saying that to you guys. I liked him more than most people. And when they picked up Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round, I was like, that's fantastic. Then taking someone like Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round, come on, that shows there's absolutely no plan and there's no clue in any way, shape, or form. So now I want you to take a look at the Browns quarterbacks coming up for this upcoming season. You could actually go to DraftKings today and wager on this. And it's interesting when you see the odds, right? And take Deshaun Watson out of the equation. He's injured. I don't think he'll ever play again for the Cleveland Browns. Listen, Shedeur Sanders will enter as QB4. Kenny Pickett is not exactly an all-pro caliber quarterback. Joe Flacco, they already got rid of him in Cleveland, and obviously he's, certainly up there in age. And I like Dillon Gabriel a lot. Side by side, I think you put Sanders next to Gabriel. I mean, I like Dillon Gabriel a lot. I think Shedeur Sanders is a better prospect. And I've compared Sanders to Kirk Cousins, and, they're going to be coached by Kevin Stefanski, who maximized, obviously, Kirko when they were together in Minnesota. So I do think Sanders landed in a good place for him.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on this, Jeff, because my take has been that Shedeur Sanders, the public figure, Shedeur Sanders, the celebrity, far exceeds Shedeur Sanders, the NFL prospect. And I think what we saw over the weekend, kind of clears that notion. But where he landed in Cleveland is now one of the most interesting and strangest and most bizarre quarterback rooms I've ever seen. I think you could sell me on any of the 4 or 5 options in that room, spending some time as the starter this season, whether it's Kenny Pickett, whether it's Joe Flacco, whether it's Dillon Gabriel, a quarterback who they took ahead of Shedeur Sanders in this draft. Unfortunately, though, we're not going to be done talking about this because even Shedeur Sanders as the 4th-string quarterback in Cleveland is going to continue to be a story, and he landed somewhere where he could conceivably start games this year.
Yep, and we have a graphic showing that he's got the second lowest odds to take the first snap in week 1. It's Kenny Pickett's got the lowest odds, then Sanders, then Flacco, then Dillon Gabriel, who's taken 2 rounds before Sanders. If I were to bet on such a thing, I would not be someone to bet on such a thing, but if I were, it would be on Joe Flacco for me. I think that seems like, to me, the logical play. Let's have the veteran who was the last good quarterback that Cleveland Browns have had in terms of any relative good. I mean, they made the playoffs 2 years ago with Joe Flacco at the helm. I think we forget that this was such a sad sack franchise last year. We forget that they made the playoffs 2 years ago with Flacco at the helm. Now, I think Flacco was not the same quarterback as he was 2 years ago. He was a facsimile of that last year with the Colts. I still think he takes the first snap.
Then why did you take Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round? Is that, if you could ask a fair question of Andrew Berry today on a Monday, would that be question number 1?
Well, I think if Jimmy Haslam's in the room, you're cornering. I mean, I would plead the 5th if I were Andrew Berry. You can't do that. But in my heart of hearts, if we're all hooking those personnel up to lie detector tests, Andrew Berry is going to answer clearly and concisely, this was not my pick. Okay? Because, hey, you know what? He knows who's writing the checks. And ultimately, this is part of the handicap that we gave people. You can have all the research and all the information you want. When that owner steps in the room and says, here's who I want, boom. Doesn't matter how much research you've done, doesn't matter what information you have. That's the pick that's going to happen. So I think that's where, when Shedeur was still there in day 3, I'm sure Jimmy had a conversation, was like, if we get a chance, we need to take him.